I had hinted in my last podcast that I think that Kristi Noem's tenure might be measured in hours, little or days, certainly not weeks or months. She still has a job today, but Donald Trump is a reactive to public opinion. He's reactive to, and it is interest. Now, look, there's a fine line with Trump, right? The more you demand he do something, sometimes the more likely he won't do it, right? Almost out of defiance. Right? I always say he's always 13. And you have to sort of, in some ways, he's got the emotional IQ of a 13-year-old. And many a 13-year-old are 13 going on 30 or 13 going on 8, right? And that can be Donald Trump at all times, right? You're never sure how serious is he, and he'll be cogent and fascinating for a moment in time. My God, he may say something that you agree with, and then he acts like the 8-year-old, right? And throws his temper tantrums and all of that stuff. So that said, I still think Kristi Noem's days are numbered. And there's because she fits a profile of a person that Trump will dump, right? He was not devoted to her in the first place. Check. She's got presidential ambitions, and she's not somebody that Trump views as the heir apparent. And if he thinks this helps get her out of the way for whoever comes next in the MAGA movement, check, right? Here's a box. She's unpopular with pretty much everybody at the moment, Democrats and Republicans, and she's and it may explain, the easiest way to try to save your job in the Trump era is to say you were just following orders, which is what she let out, the interesting Axios report that said, I didn't do or say anything that wasn't essentially directed to me by Stephen, referring to Stephen Miller or the White House. But she also fits a few other categories of why, if someone's going to get fired, it's going to be her. Because it ain't ever going to be Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is not blood to Trump, but he might be the closest thing to blood that there is in his political orbit. I think he views Miller as I've always thought Stephen Miller, on one hand, he's the type of person Trump would make fun of and would mock if Miller wasn't so capable. And that's his secret sauce. He's capable. If Miller's as smart as anybody in that room, understands the Byzantine structure of the federal government. He's sort of bizarro Dick Cheney, right? Dick Cheney was that, and which is why Cheney understood how to move government, how to work government, what agencies worked, how to manipulate's strong word, but the point is how to make government, how to bend the will of government in a direction that he wanted to bend it. But there was a principle of what Cheney wanted. He certainly had a point of view. He had a vision for the country. Miller's got all of the same skill set that Dick Cheney has, except his motivation seems to be, he seems to be more excited when other people are upset rather than following some sort of larger principle. And that's always something I've never been quite sure of, which is, is he at all got a conservative vision, or is he just a reactionary? Is he really just driven by owning the libs? I think he is. I think he genuinely believes that we immigrate too many people into this country. So I think he does genuinely believe in that. And I think he wants to believe that this would somehow improve, that and we'll see on this. I think there's a lot of protectionists and isolationists and nationalists who believe that immigrant labor is what pushes wages down and and essentially turns working class jobs into low class jobs. And that there would be that fewer immigrants would actually raise the standard of living for working class people. And there's a genuine belief. So I do think he comes at this issue specifically with a set of beliefs that he's trying to implement a policy. But on everything else, I don't quite, I don't know. He doesn't strike me as a small government guy. He doesn't strike me as a business guy, Republican either. But I'll say this. I mean, he doesn't mislead reporters. He says what he means, and he means what he says. But he has the trust of the president. So he ain't going anywhere. And so the only way Kristi Noem sticks around is if Trump wants her to absorb the negative press. If he views her as almost like a shield, a heat shield of some sort. But I don't think it's a heat shield. And I think, like I said, I think the one way she's trying to save her job is by saying, I'm following orders. And the implication being, that perhaps she could tell a lot of interesting stories about how, what the grand plan is with Miller and all this stuff. But I'm not sure she's credible. Like, I don't think, I'm sorry. I think if she gets fired and then she comes out and tries to sort of rehabilitate herself by being, a so-called truth teller, I don't know if she'll have credibility. She went out of her way for this performative theatrics. And this is what is on her, was the theatrics. And I do think Trump's been convinced that what's unpopular are the tactics, not the policy. Miller's in charge of the policy. Noem's in charge of the tactics. So I'm still think she's more likely to be gone than stay. And the thing that could get her, are bad poll numbers. And guess what? There is one thing, we know that Donald Trump consumes a lot of Fox. And one thing that I have always been a fan of is the Fox News poll. It is modeled off of the NBC poll that I ran for years, that I helped run on the NBC side for years in conjunction with my pals Bill McInturf at Public Opinion Strategies and Jeff Horwitz, and before that Fred Yang and Peter Hart at Hart Yang Hart Research. We believed in always having a bipartisan polling team to help put together the questionnaire, examine the samples and all this stuff, and they would rotate whose call center would use, because we felt like we were going to get and have pollsters who have been pollsters for the presidents, or pollsters for presidential candidates. And one thing Fox has done with their polling unit, which is why Trump loves to trash it all the time, is they've got a very good pair of pollsters. They're not as good as my friends at NBC. I tease you guys because, hey, I'm going to be loyal to my boys. But the Fox News poll is a poll that I think is a very good poll. And like I said, it doesn't, the poll is bad for Team Red if Fox News covers it. Fox News, if you can only find it on foxnews.com, it's a bad poll for Republicans. If you see it plastered all over the cable channel, it's likely a good poll for Republicans. And there will be numbers that I'm going to tell you now that my guess is you're not going to hear about on the cable channel, but you might have to read about it on the digital channel. So the point is that the bottom line is that, not surprisingly, right, the big headline of this is that Donald Trump starts 2026 with essentially in as bad of a place and about the same spot as Barack Obama started his second year in his second term, and George W. Bush started his second year of his second term. What does that mean? Well, guess what? 2006, which was the second term midterm for George W. Bush, was a disaster. 2014, the second midterm of the second Obama term, was a disaster. And here we are getting ready for a midterm election. We're at the start of that calendar year.
Do you hate hangovers? Well, say goodbye to hangovers. Out of Office gives you the social buzz without the next day regret. Their best-selling Out of Office gummies were designed to provide a mild, relaxing buzz, boost your mood, and enhance creativity and relaxation. With 5 different strengths, you can tailor the dose to fit your vibe. From a gentle 1.5 milligram micro dose to their newest 15 milligram gummy for a more elevated experience. Their THC beverages and gummies are a modern, mindful alternative to a glass of wine or a cocktail. And I'll tell you this, I've given up booze. I don't like the hangovers. I prefer the gummy experience. Soul is a wellness brand that believes feeling good should be fun and easy. Soul specializes in delicious hemp-derived THC and CBD products, all designed to boost your mood and simply help you unwind. And if you struggle to switch off at night, Soul has a variety of products specifically designed to help you get a better night's rest, including their top-selling Sleepy Gummies. It's a fan favorite for deep, restorative sleep. So bring on the good vibes and treat yourself to Soul today. Right now, Soul is offering my audience 30% off your entire order. So go to getsoul.com, use the promo code ToddCast. Don't forget that code. That's getsoul.com, promo code ToddCast for 30% off.
So the foreshadow, not good. He starts with 44%. And by the way, Fox News, like the NBC poll, uses registered voters. So you're going to see, sometimes you may see why. I've seen his job approval rating in the 30s in some other polls. Any polls of all Americans, which includes all adults, measured against the census, not necessarily the voter file, Trump just does worse when in any samples that include all adults versus when it's just registered voters, his numbers improve slightly. So that's why he's sitting at 44, where you've seen some that have him 38, 39. A lot of those are of all adults, not registered voters. So keep that in mind. But let me just share with a few of these numbers, because I think there's a pair of numbers that I do think could doom Kristi Noem, especially, let's put it this way, especially if Fox decides to air these numbers quite a bit, right? If they want to make this the headline, the TV team has a choice to make, right? The president's favorite shows have a choice to make. And they could make Kristi Noem's life miserable. So let me go through the top lines. None of them, there's really only one thing that Trump polls okay on, and we'll get to it. This is not a good poll. And again, Fox News poll that could get amplified in the cable channel. We'll see. This is why I want to share so many details here, because I'm not convinced you're going to hear a lot about it. 54% think the country is worse off today than it was a year ago, compared to just 31% says they're better off. It's a 23-point deficit. Mostly comes from Democrats, 84%, and independents, 71%, who say the country is worse off today than they were a year ago. Among Republicans, only 61% say it's better off. Look, the way our polarized environment, right? If you're a Republican president and your Republican number, no matter what the score is in the 80s and 90s, you're fine with your base. When it starts to get in the 60s or 70s on questions, it means you've got problems even among members of your own party. So only 61%. Right? You have these huge majorities who say we're worse off. Democrats, it's not surprising, but the independent number is a big deal at 71%. But the fact that only 61% of Republicans are saying we're better off, not a great sign. Here's more on how this economy, and that's the theme of this poll, is that nobody likes this economy, and majorities, including Republicans, think the president's not focused enough on the economy. Only 25% of voters say they're better off financially than they were a year ago when Trump first took office. More than 4 in 10 say the administration's economic policies have hurt them. Okay. Only about 2 in 10 say the president's policies have helped them. Also of note is how pessimistic voters are right now about the economy. 45% expect the economy to get worse over the next year. 32% expect it to get better. A year ago, there was a lot more optimism about the economy, right? A year ago, when more people would thought the economy was going to get better by 2 points than worse off. So this is a pretty dramatic shift that you now have nearly half of folks think the economy is going to be worse over the next year, and only 32% say it's going to get better. So the pessimism at the start of this year about the economy, not great. Now, the good news for the president is if somehow the economy performs better, people will notice and they'll give him a bunch of credit. But the fact that they've already decided it's going to be a bad economy, it could make this an even stickier issue. Every negative economic headline only reinforces this point of view that this economy is getting worse. A few other things on his job rating. So overall, 44% approve of the job. That has not moved since December. 85% of Republicans approve. 97% of those that identify with the MAGA movement approve of his job. But his disapproval rating, according to Fox, is at near all-time highs among white voters, 54%, among self-described moderates, 70%, and among independents, 78%. Independents, all right, look, they're not MAGA, right? But they're not liberal. That's a tough number. Party that wins independence usually wins the midterms. Anyway, and of course, like I said, right now he's got the same approval rating essentially as both in the Fox poll as both Obama, second term Obama did, and second term Bush 43 did at this same point in time. But the biggest issue that comes from this poll is that they think Trump is spending too much time on foreign policy and not enough time in the economy. Immigration and border security, 47% say he's spending too much time on it. 35% say it's about right. 17% say not enough. On foreign policy, 37% say he's spending too much time. 27% say not enough, but 35% say it's about right. And on the economy, only 8% say he's spending too much time on it. 68% say he's not spending enough time on the economy. All right. When you're at 68%, it means that's independents, that's Democrats, and that's Republicans. They also did a word cloud. I'm glad they do some word clouds. The NBC poll, we started doing word clouds before I left. And Trump's top priority as president, they asked him, what should his top priority be? Well, voters were more likely to say economy or prices, although resigning came near to the top, as that was among the number one things that self-described Democrats and many independents say should be Trump's number one task. But after that, focus on the economy. Everybody said that over both immigration and foreign policy. And overall, this contributes to him having a negative job rating pretty much across the board on issues, right? So he's sitting at 44%. And I'm going to get to this point in a minute, which is why I think Kristi Noem's days could be numbered if Fox chooses to make a big deal of this on TV and he starts to see it, right? So his overall job rating, 44, 56% disapprove, okay? On Greenland, his approval is just 31-67. On inflation, it's 35-65. On tariffs, it's 37-63 disapprove. On Russia, it's 62% disapproving, just 37% approve. On healthcare, 38-61. You see, these are just terrible numbers, right? His job rating is better than all the individual. That gets to, there are some that are, if you make people think about specific issues, well, even those that like them don't like them on this, or don't like them on this, or don't like. Well, that's what you see here. He's only got 2 issues where his approval rating is higher than his overall job rating. His approval rating is lower on Venezuela, lower on Iran, lower on the economy, lower on Ukraine, lower on foreign policy, lower on healthcare, Russia, tariffs, inflation, Greenland. Okay? So there's 2 issues which he has a higher job rating than his overall rating. It's border security and immigration. But what I like what Fox did, and I really advise all pollsters to do this, is don't put border security and immigration in the same bucket. Separate them out. They separate them out because on border security, when you say the word border, Trump's approval rating on that is 52%. You know who's not at the border? Kristi Noem and ICE. On immigration, his approval rating is only at 45% and his disapproval's at 55%. That is all due to ICE. And oh, by the way, they'd asked some specific ICE questions. 59% overall think ICE has been too aggressive. ICE does not perform well, even among some Trump voters in this poll. One final question that I think sort of sums up this poll, and sort of my guess is that for some of you, it's like, okay, I'm not alone here, right? 55% of voters say the U.S. position in the world is worse today than it was a year ago when Trump took office. 30% think it's better now, and 15% it stayed the same, okay? Now, Republicans, 59% say it's better, and Trump voters, 58% say it's better. But that's it, right? And again, when Trump's in the 50s or 60s among his supporters being net positive on something, and he's not sitting in the 80s or 90s or even high 70s, that's when you know this thing is cutting across larger lines. So I just want to get one more part of this survey, because the specific questions on ICE, which I do think we're going to see quite a bit of on this. Let me get you some of these details on ICE. So majority say ICE's efforts have been too aggressive. Among all voters, 59% say it's been too aggressive. 24% say it's been about right. 17% not aggressive enough. Among Democrats, it's 88% too aggressive. Among independents, it's 71% too aggressive. Among Republicans, it's 27% too aggressive. Okay, so this is another one of those where he's not in the 80s or 90s on something, and that's when you know it's a problem. Here's the thing. In July of 2025, when they asked these questions about ICE, Republicans, you had only 17% of Republicans thought it was too aggressive. So that's jumped 10 points in 6 months. Obviously, you might say, well, they just asked it after ICE killed 2 American citizens. Yeah, you're going to have some impact there, even among supposedly core Republican supporters. What's interesting on this is they broke it down even further. There are parts of the president's base who now think by bigger numbers that ICE has been too aggressive. So among Republican women, it was 16% in July. It's now 30% on the too aggressive number. Among Trump voters, 17% in 2025 was too aggressive. 26% say now it's too aggressive. Among independents, it went from 49 to 71. Among moderates, 51 to 70. Whites without a college degree. This is one of the key demographic groups in the Trump coalition. 41% called it too aggressive in July of 2025. A majority, 55%, say it's now too aggressive. This is why, if I were Kristi Noem and I turn on Fox News and I see them constantly showing these bad poll numbers for ICE. In fact, support for abolishing ICE has doubled since 2018. In 2018, 18% favored abolishing ICE. Now it's up to 36%. It's mostly driven by Democrats, but that number has doubled. ICE's reputation has gotten worse. And whose fault is that? Ultimately, I think it's the president's policy. It's designed by Stephen Miller. But I'm telling you, you got to think about this the way Trump is going to process this. He's going to look at this and say, who's in charge of ICE? Not me. She is. And as anybody has known, you talk to anybody that has worked with Donald Trump going all the way back to the Trump Organization in 1972. And in conjunction with a journalistic friend of mine, a few years back, we spent a lot of time for a big project talking to people who were in Trump's inner circle over the years. You know, you had New York inner circle in the 70s, you had the New Jersey inner circle in the 80s, the TV inner circle folks in the aughts and in the 90s. Anyway, here's the pattern. He basically got a new inner circle about every 6 to 8 years. And it always ended badly. Right? There was in fact, Roger Stone might be the only person that was sort of in his inner circle in the 80s that's still kind of welcome now. Nobody else is. Right? Nobody ever sticks around. Because Trump's never going to take the blame. He will always find someone else to blame. And he's done that over the years, that he ends up alienating his inner circle at some point, one or the other, or blaming his inner circle. And so the pattern is what the pattern is. A lot of this will be dependent on the tone and tenor of how Fox reports this poll. I think if they report this poll a certain way, Kristi Noem will not be DHS secretary by Monday morning. But if they bury it, right? If it doesn't get the attention on the cable channel, maybe she survives. But I think here's the other thing. Noem's other problem. She has nobody in the Republican Senate that gives two shits about her. Right? Jay Powell has supporters in there. There's certain people that maybe Trump would like to fire and hasn't because they have a constituency, a Republican constituency, either in the House or the Senate. Kristi Noem has no constituency. That's what makes her so vulnerable at this moment. May not happen because Trump doesn't like to quote, he doesn't, in some cases, don't want to feed the beast, but I don't know. I wouldn't I wouldn't answer any calls or take any, but then again, my guess is if it happens, it happens in a Truth Social post when it does.